All right, so for our gospel this week, Jesus does something a little counterintuitive. A bunch of his disciples want to leave. They want to cease accompanying him, and he lets them go. He doesn't beg them to stay. He doesn't ask them to reconsider or any of that. He understands, and he lets them go to their former way of life. They go back home. So I figure that it's because Jesus understood that being a disciple is remarkably challenging and that not everyone is going to accompany him all the way to the foot of the cross. Remember, though, that this makes sense because a disciple is literally anyone who follows Jesus. So it wasn't just the 12 people we call the 12 disciples, like the feeding of the 5,000. Technically, all 5,000 of those people were disciples, if only for a short period of time. Doesn't mean all of them are going to make it to the cross. So this week is as good a time as any to, share with you a basic priestly attitude. Because we are specifically trained to think a certain way in the confessional. When someone comes to us to make a confession, we are to assume the best possible circumstance or situation until evidence proves otherwise. For example, somebody comes to confession week in and week out, and they make the exact same confession every single time. In that case, we are to assume that this person is trying to conquer their sin and that they are actively resisting whatever it is they feel guilty about every single week. But if they're making the same confession every single time, well, then there's a chance that we'll obtain information that indicates that ideal situation is not really accurate. Maybe this person has absolutely no intention of resisting their sin, and they come to confession purely out of repetition and habit. In that case, a good priest will then tell that penitent something they do not want to hear. Because we have to do that. A priest has to give hard, corrective truths from time to time. We're not just supposed to tell you what you want to hear. The spiritual life is way more complicated than that. But the point is, we should never jump to that conclusion. We need to assume the best until evidence indicates otherwise. And that's a good attitude to have in life overall, if you think about it, because if you assume the worst about people as a basic, attitude, well, first of all, you're probably going to be wrong pretty often. But when you think like that, it cripples your ability to react positively and constructively. So think of when you've been in positions like that in life. You make dinner plans with a friend, and then he doesn't show. So what are you thinking when you're there in the restaurant alone at the table munching on the breadsticks? Maybe you're ruminating about what a terrible friend he is and how inconsiderate he is and how he doesn't value your friendship. Maybe you're fantasizing about really yelling at him when he finally shows up. But in reality, isn't it more likely that there was some sort of emergency or car trouble or some other serious matter right when he was leaving the house? Once we seriously consider those possibilities, well, then we're almost immediately filled with a renewed sense of pity and compassion for him, and that makes us a better friend overall. It is good to assume the best about people when possible. So, getting back to the gospel reading, Jesus dismisses these disciples. They want to go back home, and he lets them head off. And it's because Jesus was assuming the best possible situation, that these people have followed him for a while, and that this is their time to head back home. because being a disciple, like I said a second ago, is a real challenge. It is difficult. And the people who really get Jesus, the people who will follow Jesus to the ends of the earth, they are and have always been the minority. The majority of people get Jesus to a certain point, but then they run out of strength. It's a shame, but it's understandable. And Jesus understood and accepted that reality, that not every disciple of his was going to make it to the foot of the cross. So all of that came to mind pretty automatically for me when I was reading these passages, because as several of you know, I've been biking around town delivering raffle ticket envelopes in my spare time. It's been a nice side ministry, good excuse to get some exercise. But here's the thing. The people I'm visiting are primarily the people who are not coming to church. Otherwise, they would have just picked up their raffle ticket packets on the way out. And so visiting that demographic above all has served to be a really nice little reminder that everyone's different and that everyone is struggling with something. Hey, don't get me wrong. Some people, when they answered the door, they were delighted to see me and chat with me for a little while about this and that. No question there. But there have been plenty of people who they could barely manage the courage to open the screen door a crack to take the envelope from me. I mean, you could see the fear and the anxiety on their face. And every time I left one of those houses, I just thought to myself, well, no wonder they're not coming to church. They can barely manage one person on their doorstep for 30 seconds. They're clearly not ready for a group. So on the one hand, I'm not endorsing anyone skipping Sunday Mass. These people I'm referring to, I dearly wish they could rejoin us for the sacred liturgy, because their souls need to be nourished like anyone else's. If anything, their souls need more nourishing if they've been away for a while. But on the other hand, we should assume the best possible situation, that these people want to come to church, but they're not ready. But their faith does mean something to them, and that they are nourishing their spirits somehow. And we should be ready to help them if and when they ask for it. And all of those things are true in spite of the statistical certainty that there are people out there who are living an unhealthy lifestyle, physically or spiritually, and have no good reason for it. Trust me, those people are out there. But we shouldn't jump to that conclusion. We should give people the benefit of the doubt until evidence indicates otherwise. So with all of that said, what does that mean for us here? People that have come together on Sunday for the liturgy. Well, I guess that makes us the disciples who didn't go home. The disciples that have stuck around, at least for a little while longer, with Christ. I guess that makes us like the new 12 disciples. Some of you are the new Peter. You are passionate. You are zealous. You need things explained to you a little bit, but you get there in the end. I know this is true. Some of you are the new Thomas. You want to believe, but you have some doubts that you haven't been able to shake yet. That's okay. That is okay. The real St. Thomas, he had issues, he had doubts, but he didn't quit and he didn't go home. And Jesus saw him through that difficulty. In just the same way, as long as you don't quit, as long as you don't just give up outright, Christ will see you through your difficulties as well. I figure others of you are the new Bartholomew. You don't have much to say. But when you do, you mean what you say and you say what you mean. And everyone knows that you are an honest person and that your word is bond. I could go on. Hopefully there are no Judases today. Going to worry about that tomorrow. That's not a Sunday problem. But the point here, hopefully you can get that, is the 12 disciples were not identical, and they certainly weren't perfect. We glorify them and we celebrate them in every generation because in spite of their shortcomings and weaknesses, they endured and they stuck with Christ. That is what makes them great. That is what makes them spiritual role models. And when you get down to it, that is what it means to be here now today. You are disciples. Doesn't make you automatically holy. It doesn't make you perfect, and it certainly doesn't make your lives easier. But being here today means that you are enduring and carrying on with the mission, and that you are walking alongside Christ, at least for one more step along the road to salvation.